Well, welcome everyone to this talk. We've got a small little group today, so please do feel free to interrupt and ask questions and discussion. And so I'm doing a little bit of a new format with this, a little bit just to entertain myself as well as everyone else, but trying something a little bit different. So this will be interactive, and keep your Slido windows open because we'll have quite a few of those over the course of the talk here. But before we dive in, so a little bit about myself. So I am someone that struggles to figure out what to actually call myself. My title is principal architect, but I kind of bounce around through a lot of different roles and wear different hats, depending on the situation as I'm a consultant. But basically, I'd kind of hone in on the things that I do is really architecture, software design, development. My big areas right now are deep learning and machine learning, cloud architecture. Occasionally, I do some mixed reality work, and almost all of my cloud work is in Azure. I'm an MVP for artificial intelligence from Microsoft. So I've gotten that 2 years in a row. It's just mostly, focused on all of the things that are Azure machine learning are kind of the things that I dig into there. And I work for the Octavian Technology Group. So we are a consulting company that's really focused on doing true consulting and not focused on staff augmentation. So we typically help companies when they're thinking about strategy around their technology organizations, whether it's their IT group or their product group. I help them figure out how to dig into new technologies, especially around machine learning and cloud are the two big areas that we focus in on. But we also do a bunch of work with DevOps, and we do fractional CIO and CTO services as well. So likewise to what Kevin said, if anyone is interested in learning more for the purposes of they're looking for employment, or if you're looking for some help in your business, please feel free to reach out to us. And we are a sponsor of Milwaukee Azure as well. So with that, let's dive right into to a Slido. So same site, just a different code. But my first question is kind of vague and fuzzy, and really is just an excuse to get you guys in the right code, get your web browsers open. But what do you guys think about when you think of AI? What does it trigger for you in your imagination? I ask this question because as I go in and talk to people at different levels of technical expertise and coming from different verticals, they have a vastly different vision of what's meant by AI. So I'm always curious to hear what people think of. So girl robots, huh? Ernie, you're making me say. I'm kind of curious actually about the Python one. I totally understand that as somebody that learned Python because they got involved in this space, but it's interesting. Lots of auto logic. Black Mirror, nice. All right, let me press forward here. So a more serious question here. So has your company begun using machine learning? So yes, if you have, no, if you haven't. And just if so, when did you start? If not, when will you?
It's always easy to spot Ernie's responses, isn't it?
There's a bit of a tell there, isn't there? Got it. Okay. So for everyone, you're kind of in the same place. So this is actually a great talk for you guys, because a big part of these services is really reaching a broader audience is a big part of the focus. So let's dive in. Please leave your browser open, by the way. It'll be the same code throughout the talk, and we'll have quite a few more. So kind of before I dig into this, I just wanted to talk about Azure AI. So I know this is an Azure user group and an AI user group. So, you know, this is still very fitting though, because there's a ton of stuff going on with machine learning and AI within Azure. And just to give you guys an idea, so these are slides. So any of these slides, by the way, with the black background like this, are slides that are from Microsoft itself. So these were given to me by one of the PMs on one of the machine learning teams at Microsoft. So just when you're wondering where this info came from, it's sourced directly from Microsoft. So they are currently within Azure Machine Learning, they are currently doing 28 billion inferences per month. So basically think of an inference as an individual prediction using machine learning. They're doing 53 billion transactions using cognitive services, 24 billion queries per month with Azure Cognitive Search, and 4 billion messages per month with Azure Bot Service. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale that Microsoft is operating at right now with machine learning and AI within Azure. So they've got a big footprint, and it's really been a big push for them in the last few years. And the net result is there's a ton of people using these services out there. And you know, if I actually worked for Microsoft, the next slide would be one showing like the logos of every Fortune 500 company except like two. But you know, there's a lot of people out there using the machine learning stuff within Azure right now. So,
Hey, Cameron, a quick question on those inferences. Would that include batch inferences too?
Would that include which?
There are batch inferences. No, you said like individual inferences, but would that include batched ones as well?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they're counting them, to be honest. That's a good question. I would guess if I was doing this statistic, I would break apart the batch into individual inferences to make it to beef it up. So that would be my guess.
Okay, curious.
So a couple weeks ago, Microsoft had built and they announced the Azure Applied AI Services. So the goal of Azure AI Services is, as their text states here, accelerating development of AI for common business processes. So what does that mean? So if you take a look here, the three things that we have in the center of the slide, we have Azure Cognitive Services, task-specific AI models, and Azure Machine Learning they're kind of talking about there. So those are kind of the building blocks that are already available prior to this. And what they've done is they've wrapped those with business logic. And that business logic then brings a bunch of those different services together to bring a cohesive service that can solve some existing problem that is a common problem out there in the real world. So to make that more tangible, what are those services? Well, the 6 services that they are debuting with is Azure Video Analyzer, Azure Metrics Advisor, Azure Bot Service, Azure Form Recognizer, Azure Cognitive Search, and Azure Immersive Reader. So those are the 6 kind of problems that they are attempting to solve. And what they're doing is they're building on top of the existing cognitive services, which themselves build on top of Azure Machine Learning to provide kind of a cohesive solution to solve one of these 6 problems. And so the rest of this talk, what we're going to do is just explore those 6 solutions and kind of what problems they solve, how they can help you solve them, do some demos, that sort of thing. But this is too much content for an hour, which, by the way, I'm going to be cutting this short in an hour because there's probably 2 or 3 hours worth of content here. So, and that kind of drives me to the new format. So we are going to do a choose your own adventure presentation here. So what we're going to do is just, you guys are going to vote with Slido on what you would like to explore next. And we'll do that to navigate this presentation and go through stuff and figure out where we want to go. So the 6 choices I just mentioned. So I've thrown a few more of those in here, but you should have a new poll on your screen via the same code. So go ahead and select where you would like us to start.
Can I open up a number of incognito browsers to vote more?
Absolutely. Whatever you guys do, I'm good with. That reminds me of the time that I was working at my former consulting company, and there we were in a vote for best places to work in Milwaukee, and we noticed a computing consulting company was rigging the results, and they had set up bots that were automatically voting over and over and over again. They were getting thousands and thousands of votes every hour on a poll that nobody really cared about. So once we noticed this, we did the same thing, and then it became a competition to see who could throw more compute at the problem. So anyway, so it looks like we're going to get started with Azure Video Analyzer. So let's go there, and then we'll be back here again soon. So we have 2 places we can start with this one. We can either explore and just kind of go through a few slides I've got talking about the services themselves, or we can get into a demo. All right, that's clear cut. Let us enter a demo. So this demo is not really a demo. This is a GIF of that I made of a video. So this is actually showing the video analyzer in action. So the idea of video analyzer is that we're going to take some video and we're going to do some use machine learning to analyze what's going on in the video, and we're going to use it to figure out, kind of what the different activities are going on. So in this particular example, this is a product called Deep Turnaround by a company named Zero G. They're a division of Lufthansa Airlines out of Germany. And what this product is focused on is there's this thing called turnaround, which is really important if you are one of the people that work in an airline. So the idea is there's this point in time when an aircraft pulls up and is about ready to load passengers. There's this time from that moment until when they actually start backing up the plane. That is called the turnaround time. And one of the big goals is to optimize that time to be as quick as possible because that costs the airlines money. So what this involves getting the plane parked, getting it fueled, getting it loaded with cargo, getting it cleaned, loading up the new food, connecting power and charging the power, which apparently is a thing. So all of those things happen, and currently there's some person standing there with a clipboard trying to monitor multiple planes at once and track this and kind of navigate this problem. So what Lufthansa is experimenting with is, well, what if I just take the camera feed and use machine learning to analyze and do that checkboard in real time, and that way they can alert when there's problems. So that's what you're seeing going on here, is you're seeing all the different states being applied to this. So what's really going on behind the scenes is they're actually making use of one of the cognitive services that uses a convolutional neural network to analyze video, so that you can train it to understand when various things are occurring in that video. And so that's what's kind of going on here. So this is the best demo I had for this, because this one just came out of preview, boy, like a week or two ago. So I have zero actual real world experience using it. But I wanted to have something to actually show it off, because it's pretty nifty stuff. And, this sort of thing was already feasible before, but what they wrapped around it with an Azure Applied AI service is kind of a workflow management and the ability to understand it going through states and building kind of a state machine out of what's occurring in the video. So that's kind of the business logic they built on top of the existing cognitive service. What they're really trying to do with this stuff is they're trying to create a situation where if you have a problem in this space where there's some video and you want to track, that X, Y, and Z are happening in that video, giving you kind of the business logic that that's all pre-built and that you're not building all sorts of software components to do that work for you. So that's kind of the story of what's going on there. So any questions before I press forward here?
Well, I guess
Okay.
a real dumb question would be, and I know nothing about, video analyzing like this, but could it be that you could section off a certain highlighted part of the video that really is of interest, and then zero in on that, tracking that more highlighted?
Absolutely, yes. That is, and that is really going on behind the scenes here, because one of the things that you'll do, so the word convolution in the convolutional neural network, what that's really focused on is it's a technique where you actually isolate what's really important within the image and discard the bits that are not important. And you end up training your network towards that. So I can pretty much guarantee you, without having seen their work, that this is this is pretty much ignoring this top maybe a quarter of the image is probably getting discarded, as well as a chunk of what's going on here. And it's probably very hyper focused on what's going on around the plane. I would guess that it probably learned that the stuff that's going on around the wings is very important as well. And similarly, the stuff up by the cockpit of the plane. But yeah, that kind of naturally happens as you're doing a convolutional neural network for a video, and it works that way for still images too.
So I sorry, one more question on that is, and you're probably going to answer the question as you go through, but can you real-time alerts with anything that's anomalies with that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Their real-time alerting is a big part of this. And that's actually what Lufthansa is doing with this. It's not just about understanding that thing X has happened so that they can notify the next step that they need to start, which is part of what's going on here. But it's also alerting and sending alerts to whoever is in charge of this stuff, the manager or whoever that person is getting a real-time alert that, hey, there's a problem with the plane over there on such and such a gate, and that needs some individual attention. Yeah, that's a big part of the value that they drive here, because normally that was being done by human beings that were out there on the ground trying to watch as many of these as they could at a time. And we've all been in airports, right? They can probably watch 2 or 3 of these at a time and actually keep up because of the physical distance. But absolutely, and actually another one of these services focuses in on anomaly detection and alerting as well. Any other questions about this one?
Is there a tagging option as well for if you're trying to analyze a video and trying to identify objects identification?
There is, and they've actually built out there's a cloud-based component that allows you to do that labeling and to kind of do highlighting of the important components as well. And part of the training that you would do is giving sample video and then doing some of that highlighting yourself to help it know what you're trying to train it. But yeah, they've got that baked in, and you've probably already seen that that tool that's out there in the cloud. Now they're using that for this particular service.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of a theme with all of these, is that by and large, what they're doing is taking already existing bits and pieces that exist out in Azure and pre-connecting them all together and wrapping with business logic to solve these problems. So, you know, putting this into, well, I'm gonna actually let me move us to a different part of this one. Because I want to actually show a slide here. So this particular image is the same service applied to a completely different problem. So this is video taken in a store, and what they were trying to do is measure how long a person is actually waiting in line so that they understand how they're serving them. And you can see that they've actually, we've got bounding boxes around each individual person, as well as a bounding box around the area that they're focusing on, that they're considering a person as waiting if they're standing within that area. Oops. Pay no attention to the blue screen. So with that, let's unless there's other questions about Video Analyzer, should we push on? All right, I'm gonna push on. All right, so your votes are already in there, but feel free to change your votes now. All right. So since we have a tie, and what is Azure Machine Learning was second place last time, I'm going to slide over into that one. So I have absolutely 0 slides on this topic. So let me bring something up that we can take a look at here. I'm just going to take us directly into the real thing. Let me just make sure that I get into an instance that is not a customer's real quick. Okay. Okay, yep, this should work. So what is Azure Machine Learning? And maybe we'll do that real quick too. I just want to use an image that's on. Okay, that used to be on here. Hey, forget it. That image isn't on their page anymore. But so the idea of Azure Machine Learning now, this is something that really targets machine language and machine learning engineers and data scientists. And the idea of the tool is it gives me a place where I can actually kind of have a base of operations for everything that I'm doing related to machine learning in Azure. So this is really focused on the custom stuff that I'm doing. So what you'll see over here is it gives me a place to put my data sets. So data turns into a very important asset when you're doing machine learning. It's as important as your source code. So having a place to put it, having a place to version it, having a place to keep it is an important thing that we provide here. We've got experiments as well. So the idea of an experiment, hopefully I've got something. So an experiment is basically when you're chasing something down, trying to solve a problem, you create an experiment. Then within those experiments, you have various runs, and each run is an attempt to solve that problem. Because with machine learning, this isn't like I'm going to program X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to get the correct result. If I program that correct, we're trying to teach something to learn and how to learn something. And we do that by tweaking the data, adjusting the data, reshaping the data, getting different data, eliminating data. We do that by changing the code, changing the shape of the machine learning model that we're building. And those two things come together. And in addition to that, there's usually levers on a model that we call hyperparameters that we're adjusting as we're doing that as well. So all of those come together to basically mean I'm going to try something. It's very experimental. I'm going to do that experiment. I'm going to look at those results, and then I'm going to maybe adjust one or two variables, and then I'm going to run the experiment again. I'm going to keep doing that till I get a satisfactory result. So that's kind of what we use the experiment section in here for. And what's really nice about this is not only does it give me a place to get organized around experiments by showing all the runs sequentially, but it also is going to give me some metrics about the runs. If this was an actual model, I would have various graphs here of interesting things. As well as I would have, a whole bunch of other tools they've built out. It also gives us pipelines. So pipelines tie into Azure DevOps, and the two put together give us an MLOps experience. So the idea of MLOps is I want to be able to build a pipeline just like I would do if I was doing software development. I want a way to go from, my source code to checking that source code in all the way through doing builds, through doing releases, and moving it through different environments. So that's kind of what we do with MLOps, and pipelines is the tool that integrates into Azure DevOps to allow us to have a very similar experience to what we're used to there. Now, as we're creating our experiments, we're going to end up with models. Boy, I wish I had something interesting in here to show. Tell you what, give me 1 second. I'm going to switch to a different instance. I'm in many different ones here that will have something interesting in it. Yeah. So here's an example of, actually, let's go back to experiments. So here's an example of an experiment I did recently. And I'm going to take a look at what was model metrics. So this is why I was talking about some of the tooling that it provides. So one of the things we do is we do some deep analysis of some of the metrics that go along with the model after we've built it. And so it gives me a really nice place to have all of these graphs. And as you start to dig into this, and now this is really machine ML engineer type of stuff and not necessarily a regular developer would be digging into, but it gives me a really nice place to go and look at these. And oftentimes I'll find myself with two models side by side, looking at the same graph just to see how the behavior changed. And what they're using here is all really common metrics, and they're graphing them in a common way. So it's something that if you don't know what these things mean, you can go Google and find 100 different articles out there explaining what these mean and how to effectively use them. But anyway, this is kind of what it's giving me with experiments. So now the end result of an experiment is that I've got a model. And this model is actually represented as this is the thing that I built and I trained, and it's the thing that I can potentially deploy. And now when I do deploy it, I end up getting an endpoint. And that endpoint ends up being a consumable thing. And I'll switch to C# code because I suspect we're mostly C#. But it even goes to the point of giving me sample code. So now me as a machine learning engineer, when I get that model deployed as this endpoint, I now have a RESTful endpoint, and I would give to the developer that's consuming it this C# example code, and this would be how they would know how to interact with it. So all of Azure ML gives you this tooling to work with. In addition, they give you a really nice place to have notebooks and various other items. So that's kind of a 50,000-foot view, and we can see their talking points to see what I missed. Oh, I guess the really other really important thing is, I talked about deploying an endpoint from a model. Well, that's a lot more complicated than it sounds, right? How do I scale that? How do I, deal with all of the repercussions of deploying that into production and having hundreds of people potentially hitting it at once? And so what it helps you do is not only deploying it to a Kubernetes cluster in AKS, but they actually have built custom scaling parameters around it so that the scaling that you get is more machine learning model focused and less focused around just generic things like CPU, memory, etc., that you would typically scale with on a Kubernetes cluster. So you also get that capability as well. So they really try to provide you with this holistic solution if you're doing custom machine learning in Azure, and a place to go kind of do that stuff. So that is my kind of quick once over of what is Azure machine
Cameron,
learning.
you want to talk about the compute you can spin up in Azure ML?
Oh yeah, that's a good point too. Sure. So as you're spinning stuff up in Azure ML, you have multiple reasons why you might need compute. Well, the first one you hit is because you're doing training. So now if I'm doing training, I may or may not need a GPU to do that training. So it will help me manage my virtual machines, figure out if I need a GPU, allow me to scale my training across multiple virtual machines, and it will also allow me to auto scale. So I usually set mine up to live with 0 VMs running, but as soon as I submit work via an experiment, it will actually spin up a VM, execute that work, store those results, and then spin that VM back down. So that turns out to be really important, especially when you're working with VMs that have GPUs in them, because it's really easy to burn through hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of VM time because the ones with GPUs in them are pretty expensive to run. And then the other thing it does is help you manage the VMs that are back in your Kubernetes cluster. And there's a few other things that you apply compute to, but those are kind of the big important ones. Trying to figure out why you guys don't see the results anymore. Oh, there we go. So coming back here, unless there's other machine learning questions about Azure ML.
Well, I just have a quick question. I know you were just talking about some auto scaling with that. On the flip side, do you have some guardrails in place? So if you have any ML that just kind of goes out of control with utilizing too many resources unexpectedly, do you put any guardrails in so it can't expand itself too much too quickly?
Yeah, definitely. Especially around production environments. Usually set up a max size of how many virtual machines are going to be applied, and usually design for failure if you exceed that. And a lot of that turns into a little bit of an architectural problem by the consumer. So I know I said that I was talking about the endpoints and, handing off that sample code, but realistically, when I'm using this stuff, that's not what I really do. That sample code's for me, and I typically will build a proxy service that the developer will interact with. And one of the features that I typically build in there is understanding how to do retries and how to deal with problems when scaling fails. So that's kind of part of the story, and that's, when you're working with a good ML engineer, they're going to put together a whole story around your deployment and getting to prod. And that's actually an area where we find that people struggle with this area, especially data scientists. You'll get data scientists out there, they will do something that's just brilliant, something that's far, far beyond my skill, right? They'll put together these wonderful models, but then the story of how you're going to scale that and how you're going to make that work in production or work in real time, that's a whole different ball of wax. And that's typically, and I mean, really what you want in that situation is you want a really good data scientist working with a really good ML engineer, and the two teaming up to bring kind of the down to earth thinking about how do I architect this for production deployment with the very experimental data scientist aspect of how do I make the best model possible to solve this problem. And you want to find that happy medium between the two. But I'm starting to go into a totally different talk here. So,
have you found that happy medium?
it's a different place for every single company, and part of finding it is by not finding it. And I'm sure you know what I mean. You have to fail to find it a couple times before you'll find that spot. Any other Azure machine learning questions before we shift over to a new topic? All right, so I'm just going to run with bot service next, since that was a tie, and that's a really fun one anyway. There we go. Let's see, bot service. So, same question. Would you guys like to dig into some slides that kind of give a high level view first, or do a demo first, do both? All right, the demo folks have it. So this will be exciting because I have multiple demos here. Each one riskier than the previous, as any good presenter's demo is. So let's kind of back into this. I think I'd like to start by showing a finished bot and how it actually works, and then show you how that's built in the demo. So I'm going to pause our presentation so that I can get to this URL. Let's see, we said that. So this is a bot that I'm currently building right now. And it does work, so we can take a look. Oh, well, maybe, why? Yeah. Okay, I think we're still good there. So what I'm going to do is just pull it open in web chat. And we're going to interact with it a little bit to start. Let me adjust some fonts. So the context here is we're building a demo bot for Octavian so that we have something to show off, but we'll probably also put this on our website. So, it's asking me this very open-ended question, and I can say anything I want here. And I'll start with a really canned response or question of what I hope somebody would ask. What are your hours? So, and just to show you that it's not just looking for a particular section, I will ask the same question in a different way. And get nothing back.
You said it was going to be risky.
Demo.
It is. Yeah, because I'm just throwing random questions out there. I haven't pre-planned any of these. So, and you can tell this is, sometimes still working on it with my bad cut and paste here and stuff.
Way to copy and paste from Word there, bucko.
Yep, you better believe I did. But anyway, so one of the big things that we get out of a bot using the bot framework is some language understandings being applied here. So I should be able to ask various questions in different ways and still get a good solid response. The other cool thing that they have baked in here is you can give a bot a particular personality. So this one I've given kind of what they refer to as a playful personality. And what that does is that kind of bakes in some additional responses so that if you ask it something kind of off the wall, like, will you be my friend? That it actually has some kind of response to that. Do you love me? All the absurd things you would ask to a bot. And what's interesting is the pre-baked stuff that they've put in there is of a large enough quantity that most of the silly things that you would ask and even some of the serious things are covered here. Like one of the things that I noticed, thinking about ending it all, that they've tossed a response in for, So you
And then you tell it, not for me, for you.
not for me, Camilla, but for you. And this will actually highlight a weakness of how I've built this
It
bot.
doesn't have a context, I'm imagining.
I did not give it context. However, there is that capability within the bot framework to build context. And really, when we talk about doing these in like I said, this is meant to be a demo for talking to people and actually having something to show them besides just saying we can do a bot. When we would do something for real, we would build context around it. And you're probably building a bot to solve some kind of problem or to take a person through something. So building context is super important. And so baked into this framework, we do have the ability to have context. But before we get into how this is built, I want to show you guys one more thing. And now this is definitely a nice risky demo, but we're a small group, so let's have at it. So one of the things that you can bake on top of this is called speech services, or that's not actually exactly what it's called, is it? Let's find the right words. So I use the right words. Direct line speech. So there's a direct line speech. So I've got a demo client here that interacts with that. And so I'm going to ask everybody to stay on mute while I do this, as this is, I'm going to turn on what will be a painful feedback echo if anyone talks. All right, let's give this a go.
Hi, I'm Tavian. What would you like to know about the Octavian Technology Group?
Where are you right now?
You know,
I'd like to know more about fractional services.
It's not coming through for me anymore, Cameron. It was at first.
Okay. Well, we'll call that an attempted demo then. But so the point I was really making there is this is a whole nother layer that they've built on top of this service, is the idea that you can hook into speech recognition and speech synthesis with different voices and giving them different speeds, that sort of thing, in different languages. All of that's pre-baked into the bot framework, and that's something that you have to either custom build or custom wire up yourself. So let's shift over to the composer. So one of the really cool things that they released with Azure Applied AI services, or at least this became officially released and not a preview product, is something called the Bot Framework Composer. So this is actually the build out of the bot that we were just looking at. So what you can basically do is visually build out your bot and wire all of the components together. For example, here's the flow that's happening on the welcome for the bot. So I can give it various branches. I can have it loop around through here. And when I do begin the converse, no, where is it? This chunk, for example, is when it recognizes that a question's been asked and it should dig through its Q&A database. This is the kind of the logic that goes around that. I've got some logic around here for being able to retrieve the weather, for example, right? Any of those sorts of things I think of, I can build up and start to wire into this chatbot and build them through there. And there's various ways that you can recognize your intents in here. So an intent is the idea of figuring out what the user is actually trying to ask. And that's the intent of the user. So there's very basic ways like doing regular expressions, which is kind of the naive approach that you would, if you were trying to build this yourself, where you'd probably start. But you can also wire in Lewis, which is their language understanding, and that builds a machine learning model that then can try and figure out your intent regardless of how you phrase it. And that's where this gets really powerful and where these bots get really cool. When you start to build one out like regular expression, with regular expressions and looking for search words, it feels much more like you're calling Spectrum to change your plan, right? And you're going through that dialogue tree, or whoever your internet provider is, right? Your cable guy. You call up and you go through that awful tree and you spend hours on the phone. If you don't do something like Lewis, you kind of end up getting that experience. But when you build in Lewis, now I can just phrase stuff however I want. And as long as I'm within reason, it's going to understand my intent. And the tooling that they have built out there actually records when it doesn't understand the intent. It records all of those and keeps track of them so that a human being can go through there later and train it and say, well, this is what the person intended. And what I've found when I've used this stuff is that, after you have maybe 10 people go through your bot, you'll get up to like 95, 98, 99% accuracy with understanding the intent. It learns really fast and is pretty effective. So now you bake that together with keeping track of context and understanding the conversation and the flow. And now suddenly you have a very natural interaction that feels good for the end user. And what they've done is they've built out this tooling. So, previously, 2 years ago when I built my first bot using the bot framework. It was all C#. We did this all in, right? It was all code. I wrote a ton of code for it. And that was a common complaint. So they built out this composer tool that kind of abstracts you away from that. And that doesn't mean that I can't write code. I can still write my custom code. It's just that there's a bunch of it that I can wire together visually. And when I want to do something that's unique to my problem space, that's when I'm probably going to write custom code. And the net result is that, they throw around numbers of something that would have taken you 3 months to build is now a 1-week project. And it kind of, that was really their big focus on doing it. The other thing they've built, which I got to find the right package manager, here we go. The other thing they've built is the idea of packages. So now this kind of works similar to think of like a skill for your Google Assistant or your Alexa, where somebody can go out there and build a skill and publish that skill. That's what these are. And there aren't many out there right now because this is hit the public in like 2 weeks ago. But eventually there'll be hundreds of these things. And now if I want, for example, that weather thing I mentioned, so I could have just used this skill to build in weather capabilities. And I probably will switch over to this at some point. And there will be hundreds of these available that you can integrate. So if you're doing a common thing that a lot of bots need, you can just use some off-the-shelf package for it. And what they're really trying to do, again, is just make this stuff accessible, easy, quick to deploy. And so that's kind of where bot framework has ended up. So let me go back to our slide deck. And we can find what I missed. Because I'm sure I missed some key points here that the deck will help me with. So we talked about these a little bit, and let me actually skip to the next slide real quick, and we'll come back there. So this is kind of the architecture of a bot. It's foundationally built on the cognitive services we talked about. There's language understanding, there's Q&A, there's speech, there's vision, and now that might not be obvious, but how you would use vision is if I sent a picture to the bot, it could use vision to understand what that's a picture of, and to use that either to build context or understand intent. And the Q&A ends up building a knowledge base. So that's actually built on top of Azure Search. We talked a little bit about the idea of skills. It's a very thin ecosystem, which I would wager if you look at it 3 months from now, there will be a ton of stuff in there. So there's a lot of people actively developing for it. But the key thing I wanted to come back to is the idea of channels. So this is really one of the big bang for the bucks. So you saw me use 2 different ones, the web chat one and the speech one. There's actually like 20 different channels. So if I would like to take this bot and say plug it into Slack, that's not a custom integration. That's me enabling that channel and doing some stuff on the API side for Slack and doing some stuff on Teams to hook them together. The last time I did something like that, it was about 30 minutes to get my bot working properly in Slack. Similar stuff for Teams and an assortment of other things. Some of the really cool ones, though, and now I'll go back a slide. One of the really cool ones they just added is telephony support. So now I can integrate this into my phone system. So I can have my bot actually answer the phone and have a full interaction with an end user over the phone now. And there's already ways to do that via text message or email. So, and the overall idea and why I find this so cool is it allows you to meet your customer where they actually are. So instead of telling the end user, well, you have to go to this website and interact with this bot, if they really want to hit you up on Facebook Messenger, you can make that available and that's really easy to do without doing a custom integration. So I think we hit all the key points. Yeah, this is kind of one of their marketing slides. So they really aimed for simplifying the creation, integrating all the different AI bits for you, and that conversational, I think they meant context there, but yeah, so that's kind of the bot service. Any questions before we move on here about bot service? All right.
Can I make a reverse bot that will answer my calls from telemarketers and say, yes, I am interested in that extended car warranty?
I've already got that. You got to get yourself a Google phone. That is a feature of Pixels these days. I use that feature just about daily. The other cool thing they added, just as long as we're on this tangent, is they added the ability to sit on hold for you. So when you call Spectrum, you can put them on hold while they put you on hold, and then your phone rings when they actually pick up. But anyway. So where would you guys like to go next? We probably have time to really dig into one more of these. So if you guys would like to recast your votes. All right. So we've still got two, let's see, form recognizer and metrics advisor, huh? I guess everybody that voted for something that isn't one of those two things, please vote for one of those two things. Change your vote. All right. Oh, and again, it wasn't showing my results, huh? That's weird. So metrics advisor has it. So let's dive into there. I was hoping you guys wouldn't pick that one because my demo broke earlier today, but we'll still muddle through it, and I can, if you guys want to look at it, we can still look at it. And with that lofty setup, would you guys like to dig into the demo, or that's broken, but we can still look at the tooling, or we can look at some slides discussing it first? All right. Going into the slides. So Metrics Advisor is really, it's kind of a level up on the idea of anomaly detection, which is a cognitive service that's been, boy, I feel like it's about a year old now. But the idea of Metrics Advisor is now, how can I take that and build some business logic around it? So what we're actually can use this for is to do some proactive monitoring, and it allows you to train it on what good looks like and what bad looks like from a flow of data that's coming into your system. So the goal of this tooling and the business logic that they kind of built on top of this is the idea of simplifying the data ingestion. So, if you're working directly with the service underneath, you had to figure out how to feed that data in. With Metrics Advisor, it understands how to take about 15 different types of data in, and they're adding new ones all the time. So that'll probably expand really rapidly. And then they've baked a whole variety of different scenarios together of different types of anomalies that it can detect and some understanding around that. And then they also built some tooling for doing that root cause analysis, because what is the good of detecting anomalies if you can't figure out what actually caused it or what the problem is? So in the kind of the flow through this looks like this. So what we end up doing is you end up scheduling an ETL process that's going to flow the data into your instance of anomaly detection. I'm sorry, metrics advisor. It's going to flow into the metrics advisor. And then you're going to set it up to keep that data flowing into Metrics Advisor so that you can kind of get some level of real-time input as to what's going on. You can see some of the logos of the different things that they interface with. And then there's machine learning is going to try and detect anomalies within that. And we'll come back to that in a second. So let me just wave my hands over that one till the next slide. And then based off of that, it's going to send some incident alerts. So all of the logic and the ability to email and notify is baked into this into this service. And then it's basically going to give you a link that allows you to go into their portal and be able to then explore and do a root cause analysis to try and figure out what caused that anomaly and do an investigation on it. So when it comes to the anomalies, one of the really cool things it does is it has customizability. So that means, by default, it's going to try and find your anomalies and highlight things that it believes are incorrect. But as you can imagine, everybody's got different data sets, and they're looking at different things, and it's not going to get some of those things right because each different, say it's a machine, each different machine has different characteristics, and it can possibly know how to detect anomalies from all of them. So what it gives you the ability to do is to do some training and to look at the points within the portal and be able to highlight them and say, this point is an anomaly, this point's not an anomaly, and to correct it. And as you do that, it's going to retrain its machine learning around that so that it can better understand what you consider an anomaly and what you don't. And beyond that, they also give you the ability to do time series anomalies. So that's taking a look at a series of points and being able to label a point and say that this is an anomaly, but it's an anomaly in the context of this series of points. So only within that context is this an anomaly. The next one it can do is you can tell it that this is an inflection point at a trend. So if I've got a trend in my series of data and the trend, let's say the trend is all working its way up and suddenly there's a down dip, I can then label that as an inflection point so that it knows that this is where a trend has changed. And by doing that, then I can teach it how to alert me when some trend has made a dramatic shift, even if it's something that would fall within the normal parameters and not be considered an anomaly. And then finally, something that they found that a lot of people need is the ability to label seasonality. So that could mean, if you run, like I had a customer years ago and their primary business was plowing driveways. So, you can imagine how seasonal that particular activity was. So they would have this big burst of activity, and what their data would look like in the fall, winter, and springtime was vastly different from the end of spring, summer, and the beginning of fall, right? So being able to label it and tell it that seasonality. Similarly, say you're working at a fast food restaurant and looking at the data there. Well, there's going to be seasonality in the scope of a day, right? There's going to be from when you open to close is going to look vastly different than when you're closed, what the data flowing is going to look like. Similarly, you might have the lunch rush or whatever. So they found that just about every business needed some aspect of seasonality. So they give you the ability to label that so that you don't get a bunch of false anomalies. And so when you pull this all together, it gives you the ability to take a look at a very diverse set of data points coming from different sources and to identify anomalies that are happening there and get that detection and dig into it. So this is another marketing slide they have, but kind of the general gist of this is, you know, they have some very focused use cases around taking an ops team that would be monitoring your IT operations, giving AI on top of that. So that's kind of one of the obvious ones. Another big use case for them is industrial automation. So you have your IoT devices and being able to do predictions around that, and also doing just monitoring around what's going on in your business. You know, say you run a division and being able to watch the flow of data in that division and understand when something changed within your business. So those were the three big use cases they targeted with this initial release. So that's a little bit of Metrics Advisor. So now if you guys would like to, and I don't have a poll for this, but oh yeah, I guess I do. So we can either take a really quick look at the portal for this, or we can start wrapping up. And any feelings one way or the other?
I'd like to see some more.
Okay. All right, one for wrapping up, one for more. Oh, this is exciting.
I'm curious, what was your demo about, Cameron? What was the use case of it?
It looks like we're about to open it. So
All right.
I can explain it to you as I show you how it failed. So let's have a look. So I need to just go back a slide so I can get the URL. Whoops, run. Well, now you can watch it. Yeah, this will be fun to watch. So this one's in preview. And the authentication experience is painful. Well, I guess most of it was remembered. Oh, come on. Come on. Oh, you know what? I did this. None of those. Okay, now let's try this one more time. Now you can watch the fun that is. So I'm in a lot of different companies' Azures as well as a bunch of my own. So I apparently am an edge case in that regard, and I find some of the weirdness that they have with the login experience. But so what I tried to pull in, yeah, it's still re-ingesting, which I suspected. So what I tried to do is I tried to pull in the application insights data from a web service. Something I thought would be very relatable for our Microsoft Azure group here. And what I was going to do is look for anomaly detection around the HTTP codes that are received from a particular type of request, with the hope that it would highlight the 500s and 400 level and show the 200 level as good. but it failed and I had to re-ingest, and I realized when I started it that it wouldn't be done in time for this. But so maybe we can show a couple interesting things here. So the first thing is, this is how you add a data feed. So you can kind of get a view for the different things that are supported. So we've got some of the usual suspects for Azure, what you would expect there. And then there's some other stuff. Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB. So one of the interesting aspects of this is there's an expectation that goes around this that you are going to feed it a query. So like the query that I had to put together for application insights was probably 12 lines long. And if you've ever written application insights query, that isn't fun to write, but ultimately what you end up doing is you write a query for it and you tell it, you basically, it's going to pass in a start time and a variable, and you tell it, you put that variable into your query, and your query should then give you all of the relevant data points for that period of time that it's going to pass in. And so what it's doing right now is it re-indexed my data, as we saw on the front page, which, how the heck do I get back there? Data feed. Okay. Is that it's actually going and executing query after query after query to go in and try and figure to pull all of that data in, because I'm doing an initial ingestion right now. It's not just the normal flow of data where it would be collecting it routinely. But anyway, yeah, that was what I was trying to do. But I could then go here and have this dashboard of an incident hub. So this would show me the incidents that have currently occurred, what's currently active, and then I'd be able to click into them here and drill into it and start to see, well, what triggered that incident, be able to look at data points that are related. So when you do pull this data in, you have to identify the dimensionality of the data as well as the metrics that you're tracking, and they give you a wizard that helps you tell it how those things connect up. And the net result of that is that then when you start exploring these, it actually understands how to flow you through and click you through the various bits of related data and how the dimensions relate to the metric that you're currently examining. And yeah, there's, let me see if maybe something's here. I was starting to try and build one out when I realized this wasn't gonna work. Yeah, no data. So, oh, something. So imagine this with data points on it, and then being able to click in here, and going into here, I would be able to right click on it and start to label and say, this is an anomaly, this is not an anomaly, stuff like that. And I can get to the point where I can take a look at, some of the raw data that was fed in here. So I can dig into that. I can compare multiple events side by side with each other, or top bottom, that sort of stuff. So yeah, unfortunately, I wish I did have a good demo to show here, but one other thing we can do is Azure metrics, is I can show you screenshots of what it should have looked like. It's kind of a parting fizzle for my talk here. But this is what it should have looked like if I had a nice data set in there. And you can imagine as an operational person being able to build this stuff out and being able to get that anomaly detection. You can see points being highlighted here as potential anomalies, being able to explore and do root cause analysis would be very slick. And like I said, I'd hope to have a demo. This was the only demo of the 6 that didn't work. So when I explored it earlier today. But hopefully that helped a little bit. So let me go back here. and just talk about what we skipped. Looks like we did the whole top line. So Form Recognizer is really focused on taking documents and being able to parse and understand the information, turn it into a consumable digital document. Cognitive search is amazing and worthy of a talk in and of itself, so I won't even try but it's basically, imagine having a Google quality search engine of your own and then putting ML all over it and getting all sorts of additional capabilities there. And as a tangent, I'm working on a talk on that subject. So if you're interested in that, I'll be giving talks on that in the near future, although it may not be to this group, depending on what this group wants. And then Immersive Reader is a really cool tool. It's focused on accessibility, but it's kind of got two big use cases for kids that are learning to read. It's some really great tooling to help them learn, for doing translation in real time, and for helping people with learning disabilities or visual disabilities. It's a whole suite of tooling around that. Very cool demo on that one too. But that's a great service too. So if you're building out anything that really needs some real-time translation or some accessibility features or something that you need kids to be able to dig into or any of those things, that's the service for that. So those are the three we skipped. And with that, I want to wrap up because we are just about at an hour right now. So here is my contact info. My blog, which I've been failing to update lately because I've been super busy, but you can also find me on LinkedIn. And I thank you all for your participation, and I hope you guys like the new format of Choose Your Own Adventure. So thank you, everyone. Any further questions or discussion?
Yeah, I have a few, I guess, questions. It seems like the metrics advisor, it has a lot of similarities to the goals of the analysis by Sentinel. Is there anything that pushes the data that you're looking at, with looking at analytics with that to Sentinel, or maybe even some of the third party tools that Sentinel integrates with?
So I'm not too up to speed on Sentinel, to be honest with you. But isn't Sentinel really more focused? Sentinel's now really focused on operational IT operations, right? And kind of pulling all of those logs together and all that data together into a cohesive, integrated story. Am I right?
I believe so, but
Yeah.
I think kind of also it tries to do a little bit more intelligence with the data collection and then looking at some
Gotcha.
anomalies. Yeah. So I'm not
So,
a Sentinel expert at all. Just kind of thinking about how Sentinel is trying to do a lot of munching of the data and coming up with some anomalies, kind of similar to what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the big difference here is that that's kind of just one of the use case examples that they're using. But this is Metrics Advisor would be just as useful for, say, I had a factory and I wanted to monitor a machine. And I was taking, 20 different data points off of that machine and being able to understand when anomalies occur. Or it could be for my marketing efforts or something along those lines. It's meant to be really a general purpose tool around, doing some deep dive and figuring out anomalies, where I feel like the Sentinel stuff is more operationally focused. Oh, Kevin, have you been? Well, I guess either Kevin would be appropriate, but have either of you guys been in Azure Sentinel at all?
Not much. I've kind of looked into it a little bit, but I guess I've used some services outside of Azure that, have done some similar things, like as a SIM tool, you want to find out, any anomalies from like a security perspective. Like, all right, somebody just logged into our Azure environment that's from whatever, Uzbekistan. That's unusual. I'm going to raise a red flag about it. So it seems, kind of a similar intent there, looking for things just out of the ordinary. And I suspect there probably is some kind of overlapping technology that Sentinel uses for the cognitive services that are out in the market there.
I
Azure
would wager
Sentinel.
they probably use anomaly detection. Both of them are probably built on it.
Oh yeah, they use both of them heavily, but Sentinel's more for like a threat intelligence is what it's pulling that information into the SIEM for. So I mean that you could use it in other applications or other Azure services, you probably could, but it's mostly focused on hunting threats and finding anomalous user interactions. User logging into someplace they can't, scripts that are running, things along those lines. Um, the uh, the advisor that Cameron was showing was more towards, like we said, time series information or the other anomalies in processes. Maybe not so much worrying as a threat, but just as an issue.
Any other discussion or questions?
The other thing that I kind of wrote down is the video analyzer that you started off with, and you started off with the airplane and airport scenarios and usages. Do you see that as what being used now by TSA, or possibly being much more involved with TSA, as opposed to having human beings looking at the luggage as it goes through and just using video analyzer to help with them?
I know there's efforts in that area, but I believe those efforts are being blocked not by technology but by politics and policy.
Okay, just something I just thought of when I saw, hey, this could actually be very useful for improving the detection and things like that.
Yes, I'm certain that it would be trivial, nearly trivial, to build a machine learning TSA agent that was more accurate than a human being. But
Do they have a
that's
union? I think you'd run afoul of the union if you did that.
Yeah. I think there's quite a few things you'd run afoul of, but yeah, they are unionized.
And also, which cloud do we build Big Brother into? I'm not entirely settled on which one we do that.
That's actually an interesting point, because one of the things you could actually do is for tracking people. And Microsoft has actually put stuff in their licensing that you cannot use any of their ML to identify people or use it for face tracking, just because the politics of it became too complicated to navigate. And I believe AWS has also done that, and IBM as well. So even though all of these platforms can easily do that at a very high level, none of them are allowing it currently.
Yeah, Google could also be thrown in the mix as far as being a leader as far as tracking. So.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And as an AI person and an ML person, as far as cloud offerings, I would tell you that Google is right there with Microsoft doing their own set of innovations. And they're the only two, in my opinion, that are worth looking at right now, as far as the big players. IBM used to be a leader in that space, but they've kind of stagnated as their cloud offering has floundered. Anything else?
Do most of these services offer integration for applications that you may not host in Azure or outside of Azure?
Yes, for the most part they do. Yes, and the on the other end of that integration is they are baking the ability to build your own custom models to plug into many of these as well. So they're really trying to bake flexibility in. And I think the Microsoft folks are seeing this as as a bit of a starting point. Like, this is where you can get going, get started, and we'll give you the ability to integrate and customize as you see fit. Even if you get to the point where you integrate and customize to the point that you're not using this service anymore. Is I do kind of, I kind of see this as potentially a gateway into more complex and more expensive machine learning. And by expensive, I just mean to develop. As the more custom machine learning is, the more expensive it typically is to build.
GPU clusters aren't cheap.
No, that's for sure. All right, Kevin, I think I'll turn this back over to you.